Welcome to those who are joining us for this media briefing on day 4 of the Plenary Council's second gathering in Sydney. My name's Adrian Taylor and I work for the Communications Office in the Archdiocese of Brisbane. Joining us tonight is a panel of 3 members from the Council, Sister Mel Dwyer, Miss Virginia Burke and Archbishop Mark Coleridge. Just a brief pen pick for each of the participants. Sister Mel Dwyer returned to Australia in 2016 following 7 years as a principal of a secondary school in rural Africa. She is currently the delegation leader for the Canossian Daughters of Charity in Australia. She's on the Catholic Religious Australia National Council and chair of the CRA Initial Formation Committee. Virginia Burke is a member of the Plenary Council representing Catholic Health Australia. She is chair of Mercy Health and has significant experience in law, corporate governance and consultancy. Archbishop Mark Coleridge, the Archbishop of Brisbane. Previously he served as an auxiliary bishop for Melbourne, and then from 2006 to 2012 he served as Archbishop of the Canberra-Goulburn Archdiocese. Since 2018 he's been the President of the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, a term that he may be counting down because it ends in 6 days' time. Members of the Council, perhaps if you each want to start by reflecting on a day that was anything but typical. Can you still see the Holy Spirit moving in some of the mess?
Who wants to start?
You've got the mic.
You've got the microphone, Virginia.
It was a mistake, wasn't it?
Oh, smart.
Look, I think it was a difficult day. There's no doubt about that. The start of the day was a deliberative vote, which I think the reaction was very strong to that vote. I think it's fair to say it was strong. Many people were perhaps shocked by the result or surprised, and there was a lot of emotion. There was a reaction in the room. I do think this end of the day, we've been able to navigate through the day. The process has been sufficiently flexible for us to respond and to the distress in the room and to the level of feeling there was in relation to that, into the vote. So I think, in answer to the question, yes, I think that we are still, the Holy Spirit is still there in the room, and we've found our way to the end of this day with a plan about the next few days.
Similar to Virginia, I think that it's been a huge day, a very significant day, not only for the members but for the Catholic Church in Australia, and yet at this time today I feel far more hopeful than this time yesterday. I think that the way that we've navigated through the process, we've given people time and space to air their hurt, and there was lots of hurt, lots of emotion for many different reasons. And people were given that space to own their feeling, to express their feeling, and to feel heard. And I think that that's a key thing that happened today, is that anyone who wished to had the chance to be heard as to how they responded to the result of the deliberative vote this morning and where they sat. And then, as Virginia mentioned, the process was flexible. We weren't bound into holding to what was set, and we were given the space, the opportunity to rework, to reshape, and the Holy Spirit in the mess, in the chaos, which is not a new narrative for our church, is, I believe, very much still present.
Not only is it not a new narrative for our church, it's not a new narrative for our Bible, because in the beginning the Spirit of God moves through the darkness, the emptiness and the chaos, and when Jesus breathes the Spirit upon the disciples in the locked room, it's a very dark, empty and chaotic room. And I think at the end of this day we are in much better space than we were certainly at the start of the day, and absolutely than we were in the middle of the day. Because I think looking back, we have seen an extraordinary illustration of the way the Holy Spirit works. The Holy Spirit is not only the great comforter, but the great disruptor. And there was much about today that was genuinely disruptive. And for all the planning that had gone on, and believe me, it's been exhaustive, the planning, for all the planning that's been done through the years, really, not just the last few months, nothing could have allowed us to foresee what happened today. And but I look back upon it as a couple of people at my table said, as a day that was in many ways extraordinary. It was exhausting in many ways, but it was a day of grace. But you see, grace doesn't come cheap. And this was not cheap grace. It was hard won. And through all of that was dark and empty and chaotic, and all the distress, which was very real. And as you say, it wasn't a simple thing at all. And there were dangerous moments in the middle of the day. But I think the Spirit led us to a couple of wise decisions. One that I think was particularly providential was in the middle of the day, at lunchtime in fact. We decided to have a meeting of all the deliberative voters, in other words the bishops and others who have the deliberative vote, and the steering committee who have ultimate responsibility for guiding this process. And that itself was an extraordinary meeting, and absolutely part of this plenary council journey. And through it all you saw the wisdom of the group and almost felt palpably the way the Spirit worked through that wisdom and led us to some very sound decisions that I think opened a way through everything. We found a way through, or we were given a way through, I look back and see now. So that I think we, at the end of the day, we didn't come to a point of rest or any kind of destination. There's a lot of journeying ahead of us through these next couple of days. But I think we are in vastly better space, and in part that's because we now understand more of the way the Spirit works, and against all our plans and expectations, and through all the tears and the heartache and the distress and the division. We saw the great disruptor, but I'm confident now, quietly confident, that it will be seen as, if not the most important moment of the week, a real turning point on this extraordinary journey.
Certainly, I was just intrigued by something Archbishop said there about the dangerous moments, but before that, I also got a sense that there was a real difference in people's reactions to today, that women were, there was deep hurt, I think, expressed, and like Sister Mel said, for different reasons. It's not like there was a united thing.
No, there was. I think it's true to say that there were very mixed responses, but there was, in the room, you could feel it. There was a prevailing sense of distress. People were disconcerted. I'm not just talking about women either. It was men as well. That something had gone wrong, and we could all see that things like distress and division, and these are not the signs of the Holy Spirit. On the contrary, they're the signs of the spirit of evil. So how to move beyond that to something that resembled the signs of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and so on. So it was very mixed, but everyone, I think, could see that there was something wrong. And I'd have to say, certainly I came to see that there were flaws in the process that emerged that were not obvious when we were planning the process in great detail at a table. Flaws that only emerged when we began to do the process.
Sorry to interrupt there.
That's fine.
You guys, but that's a great point. So was one of those flaws, would you say, I know it was expressed to me, partly to do with the assent but with reservations?
Well, what they call placet juxta modum was certainly one of the flaws of the process. I could see almost immediately, given the high number of these yes but votes, that's what it is. I mean, it's Latin, placet juxta modum, it pleases me but with reservations. It doesn't fit with a deliberative vote. It fits at an earlier stage of the process, but not with a deliberative vote. And it meant all kinds of things. And this is one of the things that emerged at the lunchtime meeting. Why the bishops and others had said yes, but in such number, it was a very complex phenomenon. But what we came to see was that doesn't work with a deliberative vote, and created not all the difficulties that we had to deal with today, but it was a hugely aggravating factor. So we've come to a decision that when we're dealing with a deliberative vote, we will not have that as an option. Pope Francis has abolished it in Rome for the synods for the same reason. Now, we should have foreseen this. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, is it not? But we didn't. And placet juxta modum, yes, but it was part of the problem, yeah.
What does that do for the votes then that have happened to date?
No, they were nowhere near as difficult, because there might have been one or two placet juxta modum, but it wasn't anything like the number that we had today, or yesterday afternoon also in the consultative vote. So it didn't present the problem. But given that one of the votes, was it yesterday or this morning, my sense of time has been skewed, but we missed on a 2/3 majority, which is a high bar, by only one vote. This morning, was it? You know, and yet you had something like 11 yes but votes. I mean, it's a yes vote, but it's got this reservation. But it couldn't be counted as a yes vote. That was the anomaly we had to address.
So moving forward, how are you going to unscramble this?
Well, haven't you read the press release that was issued at 5:30?
Yes, but
Well, a number of decisions were announced this afternoon as a result of the various meetings by Bishop McKinlay, who's been a trump in all kinds of ways, in the best sense, a trump, through all of this. He's a good driver in heavy traffic, Bishop Shane. And we followed the statutes in moving to rescind the vote on the two problematic votes on Part 4, and that requires a motion that supported by at least half of the members, in fact 220 of the members, so a huge majority, voted to rescind. And then once we'd done that and had a formal deliberative vote, didn't we then? It's all a bit of a blur to me, to rescind. And then we have established a very talented group of people, of whom Sister Melissa is one, to take Part 4, in particular the introductory section that proved problematic, and not to write a new document, but to modify it in a way that doesn't just create lowest common denominator, but does rework that section of Part 4 in a way that makes it much more likely to win the kind of acceptance that it requires. So that group will be working through most of tomorrow. All the tables, I don't know how many are there? 29 tables, all spent most of the afternoon looking at the problematic section and making suggestions as to how it could be improved, strengthened, rewritten in order to pass muster. This group of 4 people, chaired by Bishop Paul Bird, who's the chair of the drafting committee, and including Sister Melissa and also Dr. Renee Kohler-Ryan and Professor Richard Lenan, will take all of these suggestions and rework the problematic section and present it to the Assembly for a consultative vote and a deliberative vote on Friday. And in the meantime, we'll get on with the other tasks, which we hope won't be quite so complex. I'm doing all the talking here. I should pass the microphone.
Sister Mel, can you not elaborate, but can you talk about how what you expect the motions, what shape they might take, how they will come together?
I guess in terms of the process, what gives me great hope is that, as Archbishop Mark said, we had a lot of time. We had as much time as we needed today. And there was option to extend because we weren't ready to say this is enough. So there was that flexibility to keep talking, keep dialoguing at our tables and then sending them through. And I guess in terms of what will come, there will be some commonality, I believe, in what gets submitted to this committee that's going to sit with it, of which I'm a part, and we will shape from there. We may get a heightened sense of what caused the less than positive response today, which we're not aware of at this point as not being in that deliberative space. We don't know what caused it as a member of the council. And so we will work to shape something that, for me, what is critical is that we cannot leave this plenary council, and I think I don't speak alone on this, but with everyone in the room, that we don't leave this plenary council without something concrete that honours the equality for women and men in the church. And I think that was potentially the cause of the hurt initially today, was the fear that the two motions that were rejected were both related to women. And so it was that reaction, it was the process we went through, and it was saying, we passionately believe there has to be a voice. Everyone believes that. It's just what that looks like. And as Archbishop Mark said, we must not lessen or water down significantly what is the call for equality for women and men in our church. Otherwise, we haven't done justice to the process.
Just some people, as soon as you talk equality of equal dignity of women and men in the church, some people immediately jump to the conclusion you're talking about women's ordination, and that's not the case. So how to deal with the question of the dignity of women and the equality of women in the life, and particularly in the leadership and governance of the church, without it immediately becoming a hot discussion about ordination. That's the challenge, I think. Now we all know that Pope Francis has this commission studying the possibility of the diaconate for women. So it's not us, it's the Pope of Rome. But that's not the focus of what we're trying to say. I think almost everyone in the room would say that the question of the role of women in the church is a burning issue in this culture for all kinds of fairly obvious reasons. And it can't be just held in abeyance or shoved aside. We have to look at it with eyes wide open, and not only look at it, but actually try and do something, because for whatever reason, there are so many women, and many of them young, who are feeling deeply alienated or excluded within the church. Now, that's an undeniable fact, and you can't just say, well, that's their problem. Because, well, it might be their problem, but it's also our problem, because they're our daughters and sisters and mothers and grandmothers and God knows who else. So it's a burning issue, and if we walked away from this assembly and had said nothing, or had simply failed in the attempt to say something substantial and not trivial, then I think we'd have to say that something has gone wrong.
Just conscious, Virginia, is there anything you wanted to add at this point, or on to the next question?
Look, I think that sense that we have to address this question, the fact that it's bubbled up today in the way that it has, for how discomforting that has been and for the challenge that it's been, I think it is a positive aspect. And when we entered the process, I was very curious about synodality and how that would work. And would we sufficiently come to grips with the real issues? And I think what today has shown me, at least, is that the plenary council, the mode that we took, the synodal journey that we are on, it has brought the real issue to the surface in a way that allows us to wrestle with it, properly wrestle with it and properly address it. So, I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions from the floor?
A number that I heard most recently was that something like 70% of Catholic institutions in Australia are led by lay Catholic women. And a lot of people have noted that it's a common experience that women are very well represented on parish boards and in schools and in teaching. And so I suppose my question is wondering, is the focus on women in governance disproportionate to the reality of the church in 2022?
Well, I don't think so. Look, there are women. I spent most of my life as a bishop working with women, and it was certainly true when I was working as a priest in parishes. You work with women, but the women have been involved at high levels of management. I mean, my director of Catholic education in Brisbane is a woman, and the one before her was a woman too. So, but management and governance aren't the same thing. For me, the question is, how do we include women in the process of decision making, which is what we mean, I think, by governance. You can't just say, well, you can be in management, but I mean, if I think of Virginia Burke, for instance, Virginia is the Pro-Chancellor of Australian Catholic University. She's the Chair of Mercy Health and God knows what else. Sister Mel is a slightly different case because we've always had, in religious orders of women have run the show, and the women ran they ran the schools and the hospitals, and the bishops wouldn't dare try and tell Reverend Mother what to do. I mean, those women could have run the world. But it's not enough just to say, well, you can run your women's thing, or you're a bit more than management. But to try and draw women into the process that we call governance. Now, the snag here can be that governance in the Catholic Church traditionally has been tied to ordination. Only the ordained govern. Others can manage, but only the ordained govern. But there's something going on, it's a bit tectonic, and you see it in Rome with Pope Francis producing the new apostolic constitution for the Roman Curia called Predicate Evangelium, where he ties governance in the Roman Curia not to ordination but to baptism. So this is, as I say, potentially tectonic, and where you see the same thing at work a bit here, that it's governance is tied not just to ordination but also to baptism and therefore to charism. So the question is, who has the charism required for governance? Father Candelamessa, the papal preacher, once said that ordination guarantees apostolic succession, but it doesn't guarantee apostolic success. And we all know the truth of that. Now, charism is all about asking who might be one who can help us have apostolic success as a result of the way we govern. So I think we're on a journey. Oh, Archbishop Tim Costello, by the way, got out of his sick bed today to come to us in the middle of the day for this meeting, and then spoke to the gathering in the early afternoon. One of the things he said was, we might just have to reach a point at this assembly and say, we're not at a point of maturation where we can make the decision on this or that or whatever. There will have to be a process of maturation beyond the assembly that might yield the kind of results we want now, but the Spirit might be saying not yet. It was like Pope Francis at the Amazon Synod. People were expecting him to say ordained married men or ordained women deacons, and none of that appeared in the final papal document. And his reply when people criticised him was, well, it just wasn't time. The process hasn't reached that point of maturity. And this is not the last shot we have at things in the church in Australia. It's a big shot, and will be vital in sowing seeds for the future or giving greater impetus to processes already in train. But there's a lot of stuff to happen after this assembly. Now we have to discern what we can and must do here and what we have to perhaps leave until later in the journey.
Can I ask a question of clarification, Your Grace, or invite any of the other speakers to comment on a very interesting point that you just raised about, if I understand correctly what you're saying, the real issue perhaps being governance tied to baptism. If that's the real issue, does that imply that really ultimately we're talking about the participation of the laity in governance?
Yep.
And rather than women per se or men per se or something like that?
Absolutely. It's not primarily a gender question. It is about the laity. And again, Pope Francis has made that clear in some of his appointments within the Roman Curia. He's appointed a layman to be head of a dicastery. first time ever. So it's not just about women, but it is about women. And if you think of these ministries of lector, acolyte and catechist that the Pope has now opened to all laity. In other words, half of the lay faithful were excluded, the women. So what he's saying is, once you tie it to baptism, it's open to everybody.
I'm sorry, this is quite intriguing to me. Does that imply a very new and very completely, radically different perhaps, model of the church? This is the first time I've heard it couched in these terms, which is why
I don't think it's radically different. I think it's rooted in the universal call to holiness and therefore mission that you find in Vatican II. So in that sense, it's radically traditional, and its roots are in the New Testament. So it might look radically new because we're just not used to it. But in the post-Reformation church and its ordering of things, much that happened was fairly untraditional for particular historical reasons. So what's happening now, it seems to me, is if it's radical, it's radically traditional in the sense that I've suggested.
because radical is not in and of itself a bad thing.
No, of course it's not. The gospel is radical. See, Vatican II was a summons to take our baptism seriously. It's not just pouring water.
Is there a risk in this of, we know Pope Francis has spoken a lot on the problem of clericalism.
Yeah.
Is there a risk of this in creating a kind of a clericalist model of the laity?
Well, I think if you say the laity have to be ordained, the only way, for instance, women can exercise any kind of leadership or governance in the church is for them to be ordained deacon. I think that's a risk then. But I think if you're just saying, well, all the baptised, if they have the charism, not for their own sake, but for the building up of the church, I don't see it as clericalist, I see it as Christian.
May I comment just on
Yeah,
that?
sorry.
Just on that issue of a perceived, danger of moving towards a lay clericalism, one of the features of clericalism, as I understood it and articulated in the Child Sex Royal Commission, was that clericalism has an element of misogyny and secrecy that was identified during the Royal Commission. And so for me, to open up ministries to lay people, you may or may not have misogyny, again, you would address that, but I think you have less chance if you have a high percentage of women represented there. And also this issue of secrecy and transparency being the antidote to that, if you like, or the way you address that, I think that is very important. So I do think that when we talk about clericalism, we cannot simply just take that across as something that would automatically happen. I think there are very specific aspects to clericalism that are not necessarily going to happen in a lay ministry.
Mm.
Any other questions?
Just a quick one, if that's okay, for Virginia and Sister Mel. Do you hope, or do you? I'm taking this on board. I'm listening to hear this. Is very interesting about the idea about clericalism and how did we define it. But I guess to put it another way, is there? Do you hope that the experiences of all women in the church, we all have charisms, but we may not aspire to governance roles or professional roles, or
Absolutely.
we may be happy to be just carers for our elderly parents, or the
Charism
lady.
of motherhood.
Yeah, exactly. Do you hope that in the final document there'll be some reference to the massive diversity of interests and charisms of roles that women are already playing in the world and are already leading in this way?
Yeah.
They're not publicly recognised?
Yes, look, I do hope that, and I think that's really evident in the representation at the Plenary Council. I, in fact, spoke on this issue during the week, and I can speak, I think, about my own sort of intervention that while I do have leadership roles in the church, and they are significant, it's a privilege to hold them, but I also have been a person in parish life, a mother, a wife, for many years, and continue to be all of those things as well. And what I think is important is that having women represented in governance roles and leadership roles in the church does in no way diminish any other contribution that a woman makes in the church. I see them simply as different forms of contribution. And not everyone wants a governance or leadership role in the church, and why would they? You know, it's challenging work. But I just want to express the sense of solidarity and respect that women in governance leadership have articulated during this week for women in all roles. And, you know, I've been that woman as well, so I deeply understand it. And yes, it would definitely be my hope that we can reflect all of that back.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, it's the sense of keeping the options open, keeping those who hold the charism for whatever it is, giving them the avenue to be able to pursue that. There was a great acknowledgement, and I spoke to this today at different times, around honouring those at the grassroots, honouring those who are the mothers in the families who are doing it day in, day out already without acknowledgement, who are doing fantastic things across the country as women and not seeking public recognition and not seeking acknowledgement, but it's giving the space for everyone to have that opportunity, those women who wish to take on those roles in governance, if that's where they're called to. If that's where the Spirit leads them, to be able to be open to that possibility.
The other thing that strikes me is that once you start naming the charisms that women might have and the services that they undoubtedly render, where would you stop? I mean, we've got to keep these documents within the limits of possibility, or at least realism. And women serve in a billion different ways, and how could you possibly name them? That's where I think to talk about some women having the call and the gift to exercise some form of leadership and governance role in the church is not in any way to put down other forms of service or other charisms, as Virginia is saying. And if you try and mention everyone, that you're going to leave someone out, and they'll start lamenting that. And so I don't say there shouldn't be something in it. I can't tell you what to put, Mel, but in the final version of this travail document, we can't, I wouldn't at all exclude saying the kinds of things we've been saying here, you know, that to say that some women might have this particular call and gift is not in any way to deny the extraordinary range of charisms and gifts that are found in women who make up more than half the church.
Christian?
Yeah, and that kind of leads nicely to the question that I had in mind. Thinking about equality between women and men, it just strikes me that really the supreme kind of witness to that is in some ways the kind of the sacrament of marriage, right? Where kind of a man and a woman kind of come together in freedom to love. And it also strikes me that catechesis on the marriage and family is much wanting today. What does the plenary hope to achieve to form and renew marriage and families?
Look, there's nothing explicitly, I mean, it's a crucial question either, obviously, in the sense that we all know marriage is under pressure, and as are families. So it is mentioned, but it is not, there's not a part, as we're calling these chapters. There's not a part devoted solely to marriage and the family. Now, probably at some stage in this long and complex consultation, it might have been said, and probably was, that we should have a part, but it didn't emerge as dominant enough a theme in the consultation for us to dedicate a whole part or chapter of the framework document to marriage and the family. But the other thing is, a lot of what's done about marriage and the family will be done locally. The Plenary Council it has all kinds of implications for the church locally, like in Brisbane in my case. But it's got a national purview, which gives it a particular character. And we're trying to set a course pastorally and in a missionary sense into the future that can apply to situations as different as Broome and Brisbane, or whatever. The Australian Church is here comes everybody. But look, the point you make about marriage is you're dead right. It is, if you want to look at the quintessential equality of man and woman, that's where you look. And if it doesn't work like that, marriage doesn't work. And I'm not, I presume you're married, are you?
Yeah.
You speak like a man who is. So yeah, it's a fair point that you make. But we had to make a choice in the end about what was doable within the constraints of a plenary council, particularly an assembly that only lasts 5 days. We're trying to do an awful lot already, and to add this, that and the other would have made it simply undoable, I fear.
We might finish it there, but thank you very much to our panellists for tonight. Once again, we've had Sister Mel Dwyer, Miss Virginia Berg, and Archbishop Mark Coleridge, all members of the council, sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.